Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Fondra here today, and our lesson is going to be all about ancient Mesopotamia. That is quite the mouthful, isn't it? Can you say that with me? Mesopotamia. 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 Doesn't even sound like a real word after you say it so many times, right? So let's dive right in and talk about this ancient land and some of the art that they made. All right. So where is Mesopotamia? That is a great question. This place was originally called the land between two rivers because guess what? It was between two rivers. And if you would look on a map today, you will not see Mesopotamia because it doesn't exist anymore. Today, where Mesopotamia was is now modern day Iraq. So it's across the ocean from us in the Middle East. And this group of people were around from 3500 BCE, before the Common Era, to about 539 BCE is what the experts believe. So that was about 5,000 years ago. And if you remember talking last year about an ancient civilization, these times might sound similar to the ancient Egyptians, because you know what? They existed at the same time, just in different parts of the world, all right? Now, this is actually older than ancient Egypt, and it was the first civilization to come up with writing, okay? That's what makes it an ancient, not prehistoric, this is historic, because remember we talked cave people were prehistory because they couldn't write things down. So technically, this is the beginning of a written history, so the Mesopotamians were the first to write it down. Nowadays, if you go over there, a lot of ancient Mesopotamia is still being discovered, and we're still learning a lot of it because a lot of it was actually buried underneath the sand. So people are still there digging it out and learning a lot along the way. All right. And I have students often ask me, well, why is it gone? Where'd it go? What happened? The reason why Mesopotamia didn't really stay for thousands of years and we see it today is because besides war, which had a lot of conquerors coming in trying to take over that land because it was pretty fertile, which means that it could grow plants pretty easily. Besides people invading and the environment changing, which it got hotter and hotter and it turned more into a desert climate, a lot of scientists think that because they couldn't figure out how to continue to water their crops throughout the year, that eventually they didn't have food. So you can't really live somewhere there's no food, right? So if we continue along here, let's talk about a little bit of the art that you could find in Mesopotamia. The reason people back then would make art is because they wanted to do with their religion and their political beliefs. So they didn't make it for fun, they had a purpose behind it. They usually dedicated their art and their buildings to the kings and the gods to like make an offering to them. And Mesopotamian art was very minimal. If you listen to the word minimal, it sounds like minimum or like the very, very basic. And the reason that is because they didn't have many resources or things to make art. So they used the minimum. They were very minimal. They used a lot of natural resources like stones, and they would import metals, which means they brought in metal from other places because they didn't have a whole lot. And that's what they used to make their art. And a lot of times, these little statues that I have a picture of right here, they were used to kind of pray to the gods for rain because they needed rain to have their crops. And like I said, that didn't end up working out very well because they didn't get crops. So this is where I like to kind of compare and contrast or like look at the similarities and differences between ancient Egypt, a place we've studied, and this new place. And they were around the same time, so they're really kind of fun to look at together and how they're the same or different. So I like to always say Mesopotamia is the hardcore version of Egypt, all right? Because in Mesopotamia, the water was so unpredictable and irregular that they couldn't control their crops and to know when things would grow. Egypt, they had regular flooding. They knew when the crops would be watered. It was easy, right? Again, Mesopotamia was hot, dry, very, very desert-like. But Egypt was similar, but not as hot. So again, a little easier. Ancient Mesopotamia, hardcore, all right? Mesopotamia was on a very big open area. Like I said, it was between two rivers. and they got invaded by other people a lot. And one of the reasons why they don't exist anymore. Ancient Egypt, they were kind of in a valley and surrounded by desert. So people would have to cross a desert to invade them. So they're a little bit more protected from attacks. In ancient Mesopotamia, they had these gods that were violent and unpredictable. You never know when they'd get mad at you and like send storms and disease and they're very hardcore. Ancient Egyptians, the gods were nice and predictable. Okay, do you see a similarity here? A little harder, a little easier for ancient Egypt, harder for Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia, we also had sacrifices to make the gods happy. Don't want to sacrifice things. In ancient Egypt, they just did some talking and the gods were happy apparently. All right. And also Egyptians, we talk about the afterlife a lot where they were mummified and they could just go to the afterlife when they died. That was easy. Mesopotamia, nope. It's dark, sad, not a great place to be. So like I said, they have some things in common, but Mesopotamia, hardcore. They do it a little more heavy than the Egyptian did. All right. So I did talk about their ancient writing and why Mesopotamia has a history. And one of the famous things that comes from this time is Hammurabi's Code. Now, Hammurabi, that's another fun word to say, another fun name, was a king. And he decided, you know what? We should write down our rules and our laws. So this is the first kind of law book or sort of guidelines that people had. Can you read these symbols that are right on the right side of the slide there? No, you probably can't read that. I can't read that. This was what their language looked like. If we would show them our ABCs and our alphabet, do you think they could have been able to read it? No, but it makes sense to us and this made sense to them, all right? So this was written on a super tall pillar and it was put in the middle of the city. So everyone had to see it and there was no excuse as to why they broke a rule, all right? Some of these rules are kind of, like I said, hardcore. So let's talk about some of these crazy rules that they had, all right? So if a son would strike his father, like hit his dad, they would cut the son's hand off. Ooh. That's pretty hardcore, isn't it? Just for maybe playfully hitting your father. Don't hit your dad, otherwise they cut your hand off. And a really famous rule that maybe you've heard before, if a man put out the eye of another man, so poked out the eye of another man, his eye would get poked out. Have you ever heard the saying, an eye for an eye? Yeah, that comes from ancient Mesopotamia. So if you accidentally bumped someone hard enough and their eye fell out, they're going to take your eye out too. Hardcore! If any man should strike a man of higher rank, so if like you hit your boss or someone who was a little higher up in the social pyramid than you, you would get 60 blows with a whip. So they would whip you if you hit someone above your ranking. Don't hit people, they would whip you. That's bad. Hardcore! And the last one, which I think is kind of interesting, another interesting one. If a builder, someone who builds homes, built a home and the house collapsed on a family, killing the family that lived there, then the builder would die because he built a bad house. So, like I said, they had really, really strict rules because they were hardcore. All right. So I think we got that point across. So let's look at some of the art that went along with this hardcore, really tough kind of culture. All right. This is called a ziggurat. It almost has that pyramid shape where they have those big diagonals going up, but it's almost more like a square building that help keep the intruders out. So these are huge walls. If you would be looking at the, let's see, over by these stairs over here, you would probably be as big as my mouse is right there. These are massive. These are huge structures, huge towers, right? These are pretty cool. They also had a lot of scenes and art about hunting. And it was a really prized thing to go hunting for lions, which is kind of something we would not do today because we want to protect the lions because there aren't a ton of them around. But back in ancient Mesopotamia, the kings would go lion hunting. So you see a lot of hunting scenes and a lot of lions because those were important, strong animals to the people. All right. And I love these ones. These are actually in a museum. The picture on the left is an actual gateway that they found, and they took it and they moved it inside a museum to restore it and kind of bring it back to its glory. So that's a huge wall that they moved into a museum. In the center there is the face of a king. So that was made out of metal, and they look at that fancy, huge beard. They always had really big beards back in Mesopotamia. It's kind of cool. And then on the far right image is a king, kind of with that sphinx body. You know, in ancient Egypt, there's a sphinx with a man head and lion body. Very similar, except for this one has wings. All right. So what we're going to be doing, we have a couple of different projects from here. Some of us might be doing these Tel Asmar figures, hint, hint. But I'm going to pause the video right here, and I'm actually going to jump into what your specific grade level project is, all right? So stay tuned. Hey, third grade, I got a project for you, and it's all about those Tel Asmar figures. Now, you're going to have two options for this project. Because these are actually little sculptures, they're little pieces of clay or rock that they were sculpted, you are welcome to make this out of that clay dough that we talked about at the beginning of the year. If you're not quite sure or don't remember what I'm talking about, take a look at that Making Clay Dough for Cave Art project, all right? It's towards the end of the cave art video where I talk about how to make clay dough, all right? But for the rest of you who maybe don't have the supplies, or they don't want to make it out of Play-Doh, and you want to draw it instead, this is going to be for you, all right? A friendly reminder, this is what one of these Tel Asmar figures look like. They're little praying statues to hope that the rain comes and they can keep surviving with floods and rain for their crops. But we're going to be drawing one of these guys right now, all right? So I'm going to switch over video so you can actually see what I'm drawing, all right? So if you're waiting for me, grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper, and we'll get going, all right? So here's my little drawing for my picture for reference, so I can look at it while I'm drawing, and here's my paper. You don't need a huge piece of paper for this. I have a half a sheet of paper. You can see my figurine picture is a little bit bigger than my paper, so that's okay. From here, grab your pen or pencil. I'm going to grab a pen. Where did my Sharpie go? There we are. I'm going to grab a Sharpie so we can see it a little bit better. All right. So when you're drawing figures and people, I like to tell people to break it down into simpler shapes and add details as you go. So from here, I'm going to start at the head and I'm going to work my way down. You can see this head is pretty much kind of a circle shape. So towards the top of my paper, I'm going to do kind of a circle shape. Okay. There we go. Good start. From here, we have these nice shoulders that kind of pop out of nowhere, and they're kind of horizontal. So on either side, I'm going to do kind of slanting down and kind of slanting down. All right. Shoulders, check. Now, the arms are kind of fun because they're kind of folded and across this little person because their hands are together. So this kind of looks like a letter L on each side. Okay, one's backwards, one's forward. But we're going to draw some letter L's because our elbows point out and then they come in. And we're going to do the same on this head. It goes down, we point in. All right, we got kind of a body here. We got some stick arms happening. Now to make anything not a stick figure, you have to just draw a second line. So on the inside of where those L's are, you're going to draw another little L going right above it. And all of a sudden, you have arms that are not stick figure arms. All right. And from here, because these arms are attached to a body, we need to close these holes. And they kind of look like these curvy triangles. So let's make a triangle. We're going to finish closing those letter L's off. Okay. If you want to already add some hands in here, you could almost add this circle kind of shape because they're hanging out in the middle here and they're kind of put together like a ball. So that totally makes sense. And from here, the rest of the body is very, very simple with line going down, and then a curve at the bottom. So from about where that triangle went, we're going to go down, and we're going to curve it. Okay, Sharpie's dying a little bit, but generally speaking, there's your shape for your Tel Asmar figure. All right, from here, this is where we can start adding details and building off of what we've started. All right, I love doing the eyes for these guys because they're so big, they're so open wide because they're supposed to be looking to the heavens, and if they blink, they're gonna miss it. So from here, I'm gonna do a really big black dot for the eye, and another really big black dot for the eye. And I'm going to draw kind of a football shape around them. Okay. Big old eyeballs right here. Whoa. You can even show some of the white underneath it. All right. He's also got kind of a funky unibrow, one big eyebrow. So we're going to go down and up for his eyebrow. Okay. A little hard to see. My Sharpie's dying here. All right. Nose, I like to just kind of do a curving line for the bottom of the nose to keep it simple. And the mouth is just a kind of a straight line here. All right. But one of the fun things about this guy is clearly this super luscious, ripply beard and his hair that kind of melts into it. So we're going to make his hair on top melt into kind of a beard. And we're going to go around his head and we're going to do kind of wavy lines across the bottom and kind of wavy lines back up to the other side of his head. And this is where we can kind of add lots of fun texture. We're going to go wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And we can add some lines on the bottom of his face. Got these wiggly, wiggly beard. Even the hair up top's kind of wiggly. So add some wiggles up there. And we got our bearded praying guy. All right. You can see at the bottom of this robe skirt type thing he's wearing, there are some decorative lines here. And there's even some kind of ripples, it looks like, at the bottom. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to kind of add a curved line. I'm going to go line, 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 line. I'm going to add some extra details. You can do all sorts of things. You don't have to stick with the original. Maybe you want to add some like stripes this way. Maybe you want to add some other shapes. You can decorate them however you want. All right. And I also want to talk a little bit about these mitten hands right now. All right. They kind of just come together at like a point here. So I'm going to kind of draw some curves in here to almost look like a baseball. And I can draw some little fingers. Doop, 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 doop. And then if you want to erase the extra stuff, you can. All right. Now, I'm going to have you do an extra kind of bonus step here because these statues by themselves are already kind of a gray color. You don't have to add fancy, crazy, elaborate colors here. But I do want you to grab a pencil for this. If you haven't already been drawing with pencil, grab a pencil. And we're going to add light and dark values. Okay, value is the lightness or the darkness of a color. So if you look over at my figurine here, you can see it does get darker gray in his beard. And you do see some of those shadows underneath our figure to make it look a little more three-dimensional. And even like a little bit on his face, you can see it's darker on the side and then it's lighter on his nose. So what we're going to do here, with your pencil, you're going to do coloring, which sounds kind of weird, but we're going to color with our pencil. So I'm going to lightly scribble with my pencil to make that beard a little darker, okay? And you can even use your finger or a tissue or a paper towel, and you can smudge it to make it all blend together to be a solid gray color, all right? And like I said, he had a little bit on the side of his face, so maybe I'll add a little bit of value there, some darker value. And the fun part is you can even use your eraser to add lighter parts as you go along too. So your eraser is not just making mistakes, like correcting mistakes. You can make art with an eraser too. All right. Maybe you want to make it a little darker by his sides because there's some shadows happening next to him right there. Maybe you want to add some shadows underneath his hands and do a little bit of scribblies, and then I smudge it. Okay. So I really want to see what kind of value, some light and darks, you can build in here. You can go into the bottom and add some more. Maybe add that shadow we were talking about that's down here. Smudge that a little bit. And then you can already see it almost looks a little bit more three-dimensional because it has dark and light areas. All right. So from here, once you're done with your drawing or once you are done with your clay project, let me see if I can switch my video back here. There we go. Once you got one of these things done, either Play-Doh or drawing, please submit this to me in the Google Classroom. Take a picture and put it in there. All right. If that doesn't work for some reason, if you're not quite sure how to, an email would be great too. Just send me a photo so I can check it off in my book that we got it done. All right. So can't wait to see what your Tell Asmar figures look like. All right. Happy creating. We'll see you soon.